friends, I'm Liz.
I'm Robby. Welcome back to our channel, Bookworm Couple. Today we are going to be talking about the 3.5
I think that's
book
fair.
in the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. Sarah J. Maas.
Your log eyelet's coming
I
out.
don't know what that was. A Court of Frost and Starlight. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the novella in between books 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting read for me. I understand why other people wouldn't like it. And I didn't super like it for, I think, different reasons.
Interesting. Okay. I have a very unpopular opinion. I love this book. Okay.
You love this book.
Why?
I
love this book. First of all, it has my favorite sex scene in the series.
Is it really?
Correct.
I've heard whisperings on the internet that some people don't like this sex
Oh,
scene.
I love it.
I don't even remember what it is, to be
It's
honest
so
with you.
interesting.
I thought it was kind of... Which we'll talk about that
Yeah,
later.
we'll
I don't
swap that.
remember
We'll
what
get
that
there.
was.
I just think it's lovely. I like that there is not... I personally, which I'm actually kind of intrigued. I thought you would love this because it is a cozy
here's
fantasy
the thing.
book.
I thought I would too.
Yeah.
And that's part of why this book was not exactly what I expected.
Interesting.
I expected this book, and it kind of is, but it also kind of isn't, to be like the Hallmark movie of this series.
But you gotta
I
get
expected
serious
it to
at
be,
some point.
I didn't want it to be serious really at all.
Okay,
like
Robby.
I
Welcome to real
the
life.
reason I didn't chill
With
out.
Faye.
The reason I didn't like this book as much as I wanted to, because I went in being like, I'm gonna love this. I think this will be a 5 stars, because I was kind of like, I heard this is essentially a Christmas book, and I was like, yeah,
done.
sign me up. I've been waiting for a cozy fantasy in this world because that's my favorite part of it.
Yeah.
The reason I didn't like it as much as I wanted to, or as much as I thought I would, and this is partially due to my own expectations, is because there was too much plot. Which is something I don't think I've ever said about something I don't think I've ever said about any book I've ever read.
You're like, this is blasphemous coming out of my mouth.
It's really crazy coming out of my mouth. But I really, we'll talk about it specifically.
That's fair.
But that was my
for me, I
feelings.
thought it was the perfect
Balance,
recipe
sure.
where there is so much cozy fantasy, and then there is also plot. Like, if you didn't read this book, you'd be missing quite a few key
And that
moments.
I think that is exactly why I didn't super like it.
But
and
not
because
but I think this. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
This, I think, it would be hard to kind of knowing outwardly the Sarah J. Maas fans now. Everyone has a very specific idea of who every character is, which is their own individual idea. That's not necessarily the author's idea, and also has a desire for things to happen every time. So I think you're kind of caught in a tough place as an author where the expectation, and I bring this up all the time, and I need to get a new reference, but the expectation is every book is Avengers Endgame. Like, everybody wants every book because of the world that we live in now and the amount of media that's produced. People are consistently disappointed because it's not the greatest thing that they've ever read.
Yeah.
And so I think Sarah J. Maas, for me personally, in this book, did a good job of giving us the cozy fantasy, but then also giving into the people who did want something that was driven by plot. But there is no, like, big moment in this book, so I think it would be kind of hard to do in today's world, to be honest.
Yeah.
In when you already have expectations for what this series is.
I also think, and I have no idea if this was a consideration, but like, to drive sales, you want it to be a book that people have to read to pick up. And I'm sure a lot of the reason why a lot of people don't like it is because it's a novella and because not a lot happens. I personally think the book would have been stronger if it was written in such a way that you did not need to read it.
Yeah,
and that was what I was looking for when I went in.
That's fair.
I don't care, because I am the person who will read all the novellas in a series anyway. So it's not that. I have no problem with a novella containing required information. It's just that that's not what I wanted from this one.
I think sometimes I get a little frustrated with a novella, but for me, like I said, this is kind of the perfect equation where it is a must read, but it is also cute. Because if it's just a cutesy cutes, or if it's just another POV as a novella, I'm not necessarily super interested in it. But I think for me, this was cute. It's such a holiday book that I've started a tradition of reading it every year around Christmas, and I love it.
That's cute. But my thing is,
it
is very short, which I love. A novella, I love that.
Yeah, classic.
If it was not required reading and just like a cozy fantasy, let's have Solstice in oh my god, what's the name of the city?
Valaris.
Thank you.
Starlight.
I would probably read it every year too.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it's
and you know what, to be fair, I haven't done an ACOTAR reread in a long time, but I did just reread this novella last Christmas, and I did kind of have some moments where I was like, but mind you, Sarah J. Maas is working on me, because I was like, ooh, now I want to do a reread, because as I'm reading it, there is so much plot that I'm like, oh, I want to get back with my girlfriends. But I understand, and I will say, I think I love Sarah J. Maas. I think she's a great author. She's also a smart businesswoman.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
the fact that the last few of her books, and I still am missing a few of the additional chapters from A Court of Silver Flames.
I think that's awful.
It does suck. To be fair, I
sucks.
completely agree. I think it sucks.
I think it's so stupid.
Do understand it, of like, this is how you're making money. That is a big money grab.
You don't need. You don't.
So, no.
Like,
I agree
you
with you.
sell the books anyway.
I
hate it. I think it's really dumb.
I think it sucks.
I think if you're gonna do it, you should provide a download code for anyone who purchases a hardcover version of your book to be like, here's the other chapter. Like, yeah. It's
if you are, because you are still going to have the collectors that no matter what are going to buy every version of the book.
Come on,
it does. I agree with you, and it does suck. But
it also encourages piracy. Let's be real. Fair. Like, come on, people are not going to. Whatever. Anyway,
I think is a much more watered down version of that, where it's like, this is the little novella. There is enough plot that you do need to have it. But I personally think, again, I feel like I am like really like justifying my like of this book, and I don't need to do that. I love this book. I just know people hate it. And I love it. Every time I read it, I think it's delightful. There are so many scenes that are honestly some of my favorite in the series, so I think it's great. Yeah. Anywho, should we talk about it?
That's a very long intro that we usually don't do.
I have a lot of emotions.
We've got a lot of things to say. But yes, spoilers going forward. So if you have not read A Court of Frost and Starlight, probably stop here, come back later. But I mean, there's not too much plot that even happens that could be spoiled in this, but spoiler warning anyway.
Do you have a favorite scene?
Yeah, like the shopping scene. Literally any of the cozy fantasy scenes. Like,
my favorite is when Cassian and Feyre get drunk and decorate the house.
That's funny. Yeah, that's good.
Cassian and Feyre's friendship is one of my absolute favorite relationships in this book. Like, over the romantic relationships, that to me, there is so much heart in this beautiful, just silly, goofy friendship, but there's so much love and respect for each other. I love them so much. That's my favorite scene.
Great. I can tell you my least favorite scenes.
Oh, okay. This is what we're doing. Let's do it.
Yeah, I guess this is a new format. Usually don't come in this negative. Also, I didn't hate this book. It just wasn't exactly what I wanted, which is as much my own fault as anything else.
I think your opinion is probably the general public's opinion.
I don't think so. I assume. Well, I don't know. I haven't talked to people about it.
Hate this book.
My assumption is that people don't like this book because it's not just another full-length ACOTAR book, and they're like, "What's the point of this?"
I think you're right.
That's not why I don't like it. I don't like it because I wanted it to be nothing. I wanted it to be even less plot reliant than it. I wanted it to have I wanted it to be something that if I had not read it, it would not affect anything about reading the rest of the series. That's what I want. I wanted absolute fluff, absolute cozy fantasy. I wanted it here's a great example. I literally wrote it in my notes. There's a bit where we go see Tamlin. He's completely let itself go. Yeah. He's our very own Scrooge for this book. I went, if this was a real cozy fantasy book and that's all that matters, it would end with Tamlin sitting down for Christmas with everyone, very much like Scrooge, if you'll have me. And I was like, and that's what I wanted. Not with Tamlin, because that's too plot reliant, but that's what I was looking for in this book. Mm-hmm. I was looking for our very own Christmas Carol. Mm-hmm. And that's not what this was. There is a lot of bits of it, it has bits of it, but it never fully got there.
Yeah.
And even the Christmas scene or solstice scene, excuse me, I felt pretty short, and that was kind of the point of the whole book, I thought. Though I did think it was very funny that she threw in the term, we're going to have a white solstice.
LOL.
I was like, okay. Very good. But I can tell you my least favorite parts, not necessarily scenes. Anything with the Illyrians, I was like, I hate this, and I don't want to be reading it in this book. I understand the world building implications, and it's important, and there's, XYZ, but being reminded that they suck so hard is not something I need to spend a lot of time reading about in this specific novella. Well, the other one is, and I feel like a dick saying this, but it is true, just Nesta.
I know, I knew you were going to say
And here's the thing, and I understand what Sarah J. Maas is doing, but she's been doing it for 3.5 books now, and I'm tired of it. I understand.
She hasn't had a lot of time to grow.
She has had 3.5 books to grow.
No, I'm saying, but on a timeline as a real human.
That's true. You want to know? Oh, sorry, this just so random and just popped into my head.
Go.
Weird thing that I did write down in my notes. Why did they focus so much? Like, they reminded us that Feyre's only like 19 or 20, and I went, that's super weird, and you didn't need to tell us that.
No, you're so
like,
right.
I was like, I honestly forgot about that, and now that you're reminding me of it through Rhys, who's also, we gotta talk about her writing of Rhys and like the like caricature of sexuality masculine sexuality that he is in this book. And him being like, I'm 500 years old, and my 19-year-old wife. It's like, I was like,
you know what's so
I didn't
interesting?
need to remember
I
that.
completely agree with you, and I think also like we're getting older, so like it's just like
oh,
it feels so different.
Man.
And I recently. The last few fantasy books I've picked up, it's very much of like our generation is being like, oh look, a 25-year-old, because that still feels like, oh, young, and but it's not 18, 19, which I feel like was like that was like the norm for every fantasy book written in the last 10 years.
Yes.
And I agree with you. I'm like, I just don't
Well, my thing was just like, I didn't need the reminder.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to tell me. It's cool. Whenever in the book she's like, man, it's been a crazy 6 months. I'm like, you don't need to remind me of that. Like, it's so much. It kind of ruins the verisimilitude. Like, it feels like it's been a long time. Yeah. And yes, it's only been a little while, and I'm usually really into like timelines and the nitty-gritty of stuff, but in certain situations I'm like, you don't need to remind me of that. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
It feels like more has happened in the past 8 months than 8 months worth of time, but whatever.
Okay.
Anyway, so those are kind of the main things that I didn't really like, and we can talk about Nesta stuff at the end. The cozy fantasy stuff. I really loved all of the cozy fantasy stuff, and the
Christmas shopping is really fun.
Christmas shopping is great.
That whole scene is very much of like a montage in a Hallmark movie.
Yeah, the Christmas scene, like literally any of the snowball fight, any of the cozy fantasy bits, I really, really enjoyed. I also did really enjoy the art section, all of that. Very, very good. I think it's very interesting and personally affecting to me as someone who was an artist. I really like how Sarah J. Maas, not just in this book, but in all of them, but this one, it really seems to come to a crux. The scene in the art studio where she's talking to the Weaver is very heartbreaking, and the scene at the end where they open the studio for children to process their trauma is wonderful. And the way that she continues to bring art in as a lens through which both to feed the soul and fill it, I think is a very, very important distinction, because, you know, specifically the Weaver says, like, I create because I had to. Yeah. Like, my soul was crying out for me to do it. Outlet. And I relate to that, and I understand that.
Well, and on the same end where the way that art can affect the viewer as well, like when Feyre does see that thread, the way you feel it within her whole body, how she reacts to that. And I feel like that very much is any form of art, not just like physical painting, but like music, dance, anything like that I can relate to as a viewer as well, just being like, oh, that like it hits you in a way that you'd never be able to put into words. And I think that's why I agree with you. I love the visual of like Feyre showing up to the studio where it's like it's snowing and blustery and the lights are it's like the best visual for me. And I also feel like it's so emotional as well, where it's like it's blustering and it's winter and I'm going inside to kind of rediscover myself and set myself free, but it's like quiet, but it's also soft and it's very safe. It's one of my favorite scenes.
And just like as a note, that amount of plot is the exact maximum I would have really wanted for this book. Because also that's a plot that is entirely self-contained, and I mean, I'm sure they'll mention that she's still working at the studio in the next books, or maybe they won't, and even if they don't, that's still totally fine, and I've missed nothing. So that is that, and the thing, part of the thing that I really didn't like about the Nesta storyline is because it was so relentlessly negative, which it should be, totally valid, but like, the book seems to not be able to decide what it is, and
because you're dealing with different people's stories. Feyre's at a different point in her healing journey than Nesta is.
Exactly, and they could have just literally had Nesta not show up, and I think the book would have been served better. Because
I'll see how you feel about that when you read the next book.
Because I don't, honestly, and I mean, yeah, I could totally be wrong, but the next book is a full-length novel, and I think anything that could happen with Nesta could be covered in a full-length novel. And this one is an open-ended, festering sore of a storyline. And because it's so dark, and because it should be so dark, exactly, that's what I'm saying. But I'm just saying, then you don't need that storyline in this particular book, in my opinion, for my particular tastes. So take that as you will. This is all everything as obviously our particular tastes, and my particular tastes for this one are just, I wanted it to be really just a stupid Christmas book, with no outside. I wanted it to be entirely self-contained, essentially. I remembered the other bit that I didn't like.
What?
And it's really just the number of any time something was mentioned about the end of the last book that I didn't enjoy.
Sure.
So like which they bring up a lot. Like, oh, he almost died, or like, oh, they almost died, and I was just like, oh, don't remind me. Like, I didn't like that part. Like, I don't care.
This is cute. It's Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't want to remember that you tried to make us think that Rhysand was gonna die. Like, okay, sure. That was really the only. Oh, but I did like at the end. She's like, "Yeah, we're gonna have a baby." I went, called it.
Yeah.
I knew it from the second I started reading it.
Yeah.
How beautiful. Okay, now to be, I guess, what else is there in this book that we haven't talked about? This has been really chaotic.
It's okay. It's a chaotic book.
It is a somewhat chaotic book.
I think all the visuals in this book are great.
They are. Well, I mean, literally, as the first note I have written down in this is, I can literally hear jingle bells as I am reading this, and it's
the way they describe like the snow and the cobblestones and everyone bundled up and da da da. It's so cute, and especially, I mean, you and I have said it, and I think everyone is like, Valaris is where I want to live, and so to give us more visuals of it in the like most wonderful time of the year is so satisfying.
Yeah, it's the parts of this book that I liked. I really, really liked. I just wished that they were the whole book as opposed to the other plot points. And speaking of chaotic, Sarah J. Maas is like testing the waters of multi-POV here, and it is a little jarring.
Yeah.
Not because...
Well, we haven't done it yet.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, and I haven't come up with one. I haven't really thought of one in my head yet that goes from like if multiple books in, single first person POV to multi-POV, third person, but the original person is still first person, and so is their boyfriend. And it's just like, and once I noticed it, I couldn't really unnotice it.
Interesting.
You know,
I never really...
I was just like, whoa, crazy. We're getting so many different POVs. And I have no problem with multi-POV. It's just like, it feels so interesting to do in the middle of a series.
But I think that this book is very much of the like
the bridge.
Yeah, and I think it's let's test this out because it's a novella. So if you're ever going to test that out, why not do it here?
Sure.
You know.
We got to talk about Rhys in this book because he's just a stereotype. He's like a caricature, Robby, and it's really funny.
This book is written by a woman for women.
It's just
this is what a man should be.
Okay. I just think it's so. Do you think that I'm constantly thinking about having sex with you 100% of the time?
I think a good amount of the time.
Okay. Yeah, that's not wrong.
Okay.
But
eat your words.
But come on, like it's funny. The reason that Rhys is the one that's very funny is because we've actually had POV chapters from him before. Now, this is the first time it's not been in like a really terrible moment for him where he's like in the middle of a battlefield looking for the body of his friends or something like that. But it immediately is just so horny.
Yeah.
It's just like, I couldn't...
What woman doesn't want to be desired?
That's fair, sure.
But you gotta put on your girl pants and try and read it from my point of view.
I just couldn't take it seriously because I was like, is this what people think that men are like the whole time? Like,
well, you're reading this. So much of the reason why I think these books are so big is because they're a release, literally. They're like a kinky, horny, like an literally open book to sexual fantasies.
Sure.
And so I think so much of that is, as women, wanting to be desired is so key and so crucial, and I think probably something that we're taught as well, of like, to be desired by a man is to be successfully feminine. Because I've talked about this many times with like, especially our age group and our era, growing up with the hyper masculine, very controlling media boyfriends.
Yeah.
I very much for a long time thought that was love. And then that made me desirable if someone was desiring me in like to the point in which it got toxic and controlling. And so I feel like a lot of this is, we have that, a lot of us, in the back of our minds. And so there's part of this that is kind of like a healing journey of it. But there is still of the like, you have this feeling that to be obscenely desired is to be worthy.
Sure.
And also, I mean, it's hot and sexy, and I think we're all kind of re-embracing our sexuality in a way of like being open to those desires and whatever they look like. And so I think you're right. Rhys is a caricature. That's why women love him, because he's written by a woman for women. That's the whole point. As I'm wearing my Rhysand's favorite sweatshirt.
I just thought it was very funny. It's, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, nothing worse than men writing women poorly. That's such a stereotype in the fantasy genre, and I will take this over that any day. Yeah. It still just made me laugh.
No, that's wasn't totally
even,
fair.
It wasn't even really a bad thing.
Yeah.
If it continues in the next novels, I might start to get annoyed, but it's not a bad thing. I just thought it was mostly funny, and honestly, for a book like this, totally works. Like that's totally great. Like all he wants for Christmas is to get laid, and that's great.
Yeah. This I'll bring it back to this because it is one of my favorite sex scenes in the series.
Yeah, what
the
happens
scene with them in the cabin.
Remember.
It's when he allows her to see them through his eyes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's
baby,
hot. Yeah,
like,
sure.
I'm obsessed with it. And mind you, yes, the painting scene, nothing will ever be better than that. It's so good. But this one specifically, I think because it catches you off guard in this cozy fantasy novel that I was like, whew, feeling so hot and spicy. And I do like the...
You knew it was coming based on, literally.
But this is different. Like, I had never read anything like that in which, you know,
They meld minds.
Yeah, and the female is, like, you're watching yourself. Mm-hmm. I think that's so hot. I think it's stunning. And I think we're at the point with Rhysand and Feyre where we can kind of go there. We can kind of go to those like slightly kinkier places. It's like we're kind of ready now of like let's play. And I love it.
I'm trying to think if there's any other major plot lines or people that I really want to talk about. Elaine and not Lucian. Asriel. Yeah, they're vibes.
They're vibing.
Vibes there. So there's that. I feel a little bit bad for Lucian, but it seems like he's in love with that human queen who turns into a firebird or something. Vesta. So he'll be fine.
I hope so. We love Lucian.
Poor Tamlin.
We're a Lucian fan.
Tamlin is a Scrooge in this book.
Scrooge. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
You're so
he super is, and it's
God bless him.
Very sad. Trying to think.
Yeah,
of any other
Cassian and Nesta.
Cassian and Nesta. I wanted them to get in a fight. I didn't want him to just like kind of give up. I was bummed about that. I was like, okay, if we're gonna do this, like, get in a fight.
Fiery people.
And it just wasn't. And look, I feel like such a dick being like, I'm so annoyed. I'm so over Nesta's storyline, but I just am. And again, I understand what's happening, and there's nothing that's wrong about it.
I think you're in the norm, honestly.
I'm just like, it's very one note. Like, it's literally... Also, they use the word maidenhead in this book. I'm like, what year is this? But, yeah. I was like, I haven't read that since I was reading, like, old historical fiction books. But, okay.
What?
Sure, Cassian. Don't worry about who took her maidenhead.
Maidenhead.
I did think it was interesting that she's, like, very, very self-destructive, but that's, again... Then just don't show up. I don't know. I didn't need to read about it. Also, her being mean to Elaine is, I'm like, that's the line, man.
Don't mess with my girl.
Don't be mean to Elaine.
She's our precious, precious girl.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a ton to say because I understand.
Okay,
it's not that I don't understand the storyline and I don't understand what Sarah J. Maas is doing. I just, for my personal taste as a reader, I'm like, it's been this for too long. Also, because it's such a huge step backwards from the tiny half step forwards we had at the end of the third book.
But I find this so realistic. It has been a short amount of time, first of all. This has not been very long, 6 months or whatever. If you want someone to grow, not everyone is going to have that lickety-split change of mind. And how often, think of like addicts, like how often do you get to a point where you're like, I'm at a successful point, and then the depression hits and you fall. So to me, I think it is a much more realistic version of someone suffering through trauma and depression. I guess not much more realistic, but a more realistic
time period.
Yeah, a more realistic time period. And because we handle a lot of that with, especially the three different sisters are like three different versions of depression. And I think everyone's version of emotional, like going through emotional turmoil can look different. And there is not just one version of being depressed. And so that's what I like with these characters, because we see Feyre have one specific journey, maybe the journey that we all wish we could take. But then we have Elaine, who tucks herself away and keeps to herself. And then we have Nesta, who's consistently self-destructive and just nasty. And I think it's just 3 reflections of a different way of dealing with the harshness of life, and sure. I find it very healing. But I do understand the frustration, because I'm not reading this and being like, yes, I love that Nesta just threw Cassian's gift at his face and blah blah whatever. I don't live that, but I'm reading it from the lens of being like, I get it, okay.
Yeah, I know.
It sucks and it's annoying, but
I get it too. I think my problem with it, and I honestly didn't realize until just now when you were talking about it, I think my problem with it is Sarah J. Maas is trying to write it out over a maybe not actually realistic, but more realistic time frame than she writes anything else in this book. And that's what makes it feel stagnant.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair.
Everything in this book happens so fast, and Sarah J. Maas wants to be the first person to remind you that it's been like less than a year since everything of this started. And Nesta is the only person who's even kind of in the real world with how long it takes to deal with emotional issues. Feyre's gone through like multiple revolutions with her depression. Yeah. Nesta's flavor is exactly the same. Yeah. And it feels stagnant because everyone else is changing and growing so fast, whether or not that's realistic. So if you stick one person on a different timeline than everyone else, it feels like nothing is happening, and I think that's my problem with it.
That's totally fair.
Thank you for helping me realize that.
You're so welcome. That's why we have these conversations.
Yeah, exactly. That's really fun.
Anywho, Happy Solstice.
Happy Solstice. I don't really think that there's anything else. Moore's storyline is fine. She's fun. I really liked Amren and her boyfriend, whose name is whatever.
Tarquin?
No, that's the king. I don't remember his name, but he was fun. It was fun having the new boyfriend come hang out with the family for Solstice. Yes. I liked that a lot. And especially from a character like Amren is so great because she's like, there's that part of her that like you would think wouldn't care, but she also like super cares. Oh, she super cares. Super cares. Great. Yeah. Like, I will also say, and this is such a stupid me thing, and you're gonna roll your eyes so hard, but there's a line in the beginning where Feyre's like thinking about Amren and what she's done. Another section where I was like, stop talking. Things I didn't want to think about. Where she was like, I don't want to think about. This was the bad part of the last book. Stop talking about it. And she was like, something along the lines of like, a creature who brought fire and brimstone to the masses. And I went, that's a pretty big retcon. Even if it is true, from what I remember, Amren said, I was a messenger for a young god. And you took, like, slaughter thousands out of that. I was like, okay. Well, I think there are references to her being like a destroyer. Okay, I must have missed those. Yeah. Because all I really remember is the bit where Amren was like, I was a messenger for a young god, and I was like, oh, you were an angel. But I think she also talks about like the deeds that she did for this god. Okay, must have forgotten about that part. I was just like, this feels like Tell us, I mean, I might be misremembering, but I think I remember, so let me know. Do you want to rate this one out of... I would say solstice gifts. There's not a solstice tree, yeah, that's cute. I don't think they do like garlands. They do like garlands and things. But that would be it. So I think a solstice gift would be easier. Solstice gift, yeah. How many would you give this? I'd give this a 3. I didn't dislike this book. It just wasn't what I wanted it to be. I don't really. I mean, I understand the hate, but I think that would probably be from people who are more casual readers. Nothing wrong with that. As someone who's read a bunch of series where there's a ton of novellas that include a bunch of very vital information, I'm like, yeah, this is par for the course. Classic, yeah. I just wanted this to be just like, if Sarah J. Maas ever wrote a book that was just like, we're chilling in Valaris and it's like the fall or it's like Halloween or whatever our version of that is, I would, and nothing else happens, I would be the first person in line to buy that book. I think we have to go to one of those like Starlight balls. A lot of people will host like a Starlight festival balls, and so like real people in real life will go to like a really cool location. Oh, cool! And it's just like essentially pretending you're like in Valaris and wear pretty things and dance around. Yeah, and great. It's like creating the environment. So yeah, if you know of one, let us know. Yeah. Anyway, so 3 out of 5 solstice presents for me. It's not a bad book. It's just kind of in the middle of the road for me. I thought it was fine. I would give it 4.5 solstice presents. I love this book. Okay. I don't know why. I can't even explain to you why I love it. You don't need to. I love the coziness of it. I love these characters. I don't normally love a novella, but this one I think is really fun. And I like having a book that I can read every year from this series because it's a cute, lickety-split little read. I do agree with you, like, that it would be even easier to read if there was no plot. Yeah, there was no plot, but that's not what we're reading. Yeah. But I will say it does almost always inspire me to do a reread, so maybe I'm in the... Maybe that's in my future.
And you.
All right, well, those are our thoughts. Let us know what you think down below. Did we talk about your favorite bits or not? Do you like this book? Do you not like this book? And why? I'm actually interested to hear, like, what people feel like about this book. I'd love to chat in the comments down below. Just be like, if you don't like this book, what is your reason? Because I have assumptions for what I think the reason is people don't like this book. But I could be totally wrong. Maybe everyone is like me, and it's like, all I wanted was a Christmas story. Yeah. Which... Great. Same. Me too. But thank you all so much for watching. Like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. But
we'll see you on our next adventure.